All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we are talking about what's the title? Technical debt and how to avoid it. Is that what it is? Technical debt and how to avoid it. All right. So we're talking. I'm talking today with Chad. Chad, my man, Chad Edwards. You are in Saskatoon, right?
In Edmonton.
Are you in Edmonton?
Yeah,
Oh, why
just
did I
west of
think you're
Edmonton in
in?
Stony Plain. Living the small town life.
All right, cool. So tell us all a little bit about yourself. I know you've been with Simply PHP. You've been an employee with Simply PHP. Has it been a couple of years now? Has it been two
It will be
years?
as of July. Yeah,
As of July, it'll be 2 years.
yeah.
Seems
I
longer.
joined right like 3 months after the pandemic started. So I've been here since the beginning of remote work.
Were you our first remote
Second,
employee? Second.
Kelly was the first.
Kelly was the first. All right, awesome. And you're both still with us. That's absolutely fantastic. So
Yeah,
you're living in a little suburb of Edmonton, right?
it's Stony Plain, so it's like
Stony
west of
Plains.
Edmonton. There's Spruce Grove at Stony Plain, and they're kind of city size, but not really. But it's a very different feel. So it's a lot smaller, a lot calmer.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Nice.
I used to live in Edmonton for it was like 30 years I lived in Edmonton, and then we were like, you know what, we need to move out to someplace a little bit quieter and
Yeah.
simpler.
That's cool. I see the Irish World logo behind you. Are you Irish?
My wife is.
Oh, your wife is Irish. Was she
Yeah,
born here or in Ireland?
she was born here, but she's like a lot of her family is from Ireland, so she's got a close connection.
Are her parents? I'm getting a little bit personal. I don't even know why I'm at. I'm just. This is how I warm up.
It's all good.
I ask personal questions.
It's all
Never
good.
mind. Is she like the first generation born in Canada? That's
Um,
my last question.
kind of second, like a lot of her
Second.
family
Okay.
came from Ireland, or they came from or Nova Scotia and then to Alberta, but her mother was born
Ooh.
here as well.
Okay. Nice. Nova Scotia. Love it. Love Nova
Hmm.
Scotia.
It's very
So
nice.
yeah, have you ever been?
I have, yeah. We did our
Yeah.
honeymoon there.
You had your honeymoon there.
Yeah, we did PEI, New
Well
Brunswick, and Nova
played.
Scotia.
Very nice. Very nice. So, yeah, let's get right into it. Let's talk about technical debt. First of all, Chad, I've heard a couple definitions of technical debt. I would love for you to tell me what is technical debt? What is it?
Sure. So my interpretation is it's when you take the easy or cheap solution, knowing or maybe not knowing, but you really like ultimately you have to rebuild later. Your solution will not work, it will not scale. So my view has always
Ooh.
been you put off the work that you need to do now for later to get the product done cheaply and quickly. But now at some point you have to rebuild because it won't be sustainable, it won't be scalable.
Okay, so you mean you're writing your code to do a specific function, but you're kind of doing a little bit of a shortcut. You know internally that this is not going to work long term, but you
Mhm.
do it anyway?
It's usually the business. So a business will come down, the product owner will say, "Hey, we want this app. It has to do these 10 things, but we don't want to pay for it. We want to get it done in 3 months. We want it done fast. Skip these whatever you can to get it out the door." And usually, what happens
Oh.
is, an executive or someone will say, "Okay, I need to get this going for investors. I need to get it going for stakeholders. Like someone wants to see it as soon as possible." So it's usually like there's a business, like a financial drive to do it. The dev team usually will say, "Okay, we can do it, but we have to give up these things that you might find out we'll pay more later because we'll suffer from it."
Okay, okay, that's interesting. So, is that a decision that the developer makes on their own, or is it more like you just said? Will the developer turn around and say, "Well, yes, I can do this in this time period"? It's funny, eh? It's always that boardroom decision that is telling the developer how to do their job, and they ultimately end up paying for it. But typically, does the developer raise their hand and say, "Listen, okay, I could sort of, I think, reach your deadline for your MVP. However, it's going to create technical debt that farther down the line you're going to end up paying for anyway." Is that a conversation that takes place, or does the developer just swallow it and just do it and then we
Yeah, I've
deal with
seen
it
it go
later.
both ways. Um,
Both ways, yeah.
yeah, so I've seen situations where they say, we can do it. It'll take us, let's say, $20,000 and 8 months. I don't know, like, as an example.
Yeah.
And someone will come back down, what can you do to make it shorter? We in 6 months, we only have this much money. I've seen situations where
Hmm.
the team might be a little bit more, not passive, but the culture is more, you do what you're told. So I've seen companies like that as well, where someone is so used to getting their way that the team they'll do it and they won't say anything. But like my experience is usually the team will come back and they'll give a risk assessment and say, okay, if we do this, we need this much time. If you really can't be flexible, we can get rid of these steps. However, long term, be aware you will have to pay for this to be done or rebuilt, or something will come up down the road.
Okay, when you say get rid of these steps, you're not meaning eliminate some features. You're saying we can get rid of these steps that are like best practices when it comes to writing code. So
Yeah, so it could
shortcuts.
be no testing, remove, the
Hmm.
scary scenarios, remove some validation, don't do your updates,
Okay.
don't do like risk assessment or penetration testing, things like that.
Okay. Okay. So how do we avoid that type of scenario? I know, the obvious answer to me right away is, push back to the boardroom. Because, the boardroom deadlines are a thing in our industry, and that's
Mhm.
something that we have to deal with on a pretty regular basis. And a boardroom deadline to me is the C-level executives upstairs coming up with deadlines according to their budget, according to their investor meetings that they're going to have, and they have absolutely nothing to do with the engineer that's actually doing the work.
Mhm.
So how do you advise, as someone who's obviously experienced this, and you're an engineer, you're a programmer, and you're getting dictated these deadlines that are forcing you to create technical debt? What do you do?
So one option is, produce a very detailed report of here are all the things that could happen. Here's all the risk. Here's the risk of the business. So, and it may not work, but it's okay if we take out these 10 steps, and one is regular updates, penetration testing, having regular meetings and reevaluating our progress as we go. Down the road, we might have $20,000 in additional cost trying to rebuild this because we failed to do maintenance and we failed to do this properly from the beginning. And having to rebuild it means that we have to take it all down, tear it apart, and actually rebuild from scratch. In some cases, they might come back and say, okay, you know what? We would love to be able to do this quickly and cheaply, but long term, our stakeholders may not appreciate, being told, sorry, but we have to actually spend the same amount of money and then some again, in a year because the project is no longer meeting our needs and can't be like it can't evolve.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Yeah, I think the conversation can easily be had, especially if it's a startup and they're looking for an MVP, right? Minimum viable product in order for them to take it to market to try to get some venture capital. It's something that needs to be said. Look, we're going to build something really quick. We're going to build something very economically feasible for you. But you need to know when you do get your money and it works that you're going to have to rebuild, because this is kind of like I don't know if a house of cards is the way to say it, but it's kind of something very fast, it could be something that does the basic functionality, but the moment you start building it, and the moment you start using it and adding clients and scaling, it's not gonna pass the test. It's not gonna work.
Yeah, and there's a huge risk there because you might have, say, a marketing team who goes to the client and says, "Hey, we've made this product. It does all of these amazing things. It is, the best product we've ever created. It is a shining beacon of our company."
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's true. You got to make sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to what the
yeah,
product is actually, the
and I've
quality
seen
of
that
it.
happen. It was a marketing team. They promised the moon,
Oh,
and yeah, and
yeah.
so the prototype goes out. product does not do what it's supposed to. It's very unstable, which was, was fine. It's supposed to be a prototype, but the users were told it was actually a polished product. So the minute they saw it, they said, you know what, if this is your polished prototype, we don't want it because it's so broken, and it was really just meant to be a proof of concept.
Proof of
So
concept, yeah.
yeah, and then you lose your stakeholders, you lose your investments. So you have a huge risk that you actually build this whole thing and turn away your business by accident because they're expecting something better.
Yeah, that could be a major problem. I know that startups, we don't work a lot with startups. I'll be honest with you, but startups, their initial product is always it always seems to be like that because they're not even 100% sure what they need. They're not gonna 100% sure what their clients are gonna like. They build way too much. More times than not, they build like way too many features. But all that to say that I think that a startup, there's always a rebuild. You have your proof of concept, your MVP, you get some money, you get some venture capitalists, but you always have that, okay, now we got to rebuild nice and properly, a little slower. Now having all this knowledge and all this feedback from our early adopters, so that there's always a rebuild on the horizon. But I think the technical debt is a huge thing if it's not open and transparent and known by everyone. Like you said, the marketing team needs to know that this thing needs to be rebuilt eventually.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest issue too is if, like, let's say you're not a startup, you're actually going live as, say, a service provider for, I don't know, Airbnb. Like you're an Airbnb competitor, and you are building a product that you want to actually compete from day one. You do it cheaply and you put everything off, and then the day you launch, you've got 10,000 customers saying, "I can't buy. I hate your product. I'm never coming back." And now you're stuck. So like the issue of technical debt is you could run the risk if you don't, like if you're not realistic and you're not taking the right risks, like you're not assessing your risks properly, you have the very real chance that you might actually go live with something that your customers will not come back, and spend money on your business because it's just so unstable.
Understood. I know. I saw a meme. I think it was actually Raf that shared it, maybe a year ago or two, and it was kind of poking fun at people creating all kinds of technical debt and then resigning and going to work somewhere else to get away from it. Did you post that, Raf? Yeah. And it kind of makes sense, right? I was like, oh, after a few years, I'm going to go on a new journey. But meanwhile, they're leaving behind this, platform full of shortcuts they took, and not necessarily their fault, right? They're probably dealing with boardroom deadlines and startup CEOs that are doing the rah, you can do it. This is the deadline that I dreamed up for you type of thing. But how do you, I don't know if you've had any experience with this, but let's say you're a new employee at a company and you've been assigned your first shiny new project and you're motivated, and all of a sudden you see this debacle that was built on a shoestring budget, on a crazy timeline, with all kinds of technical debt, like using the latest, framework potentially, using Laravel or something like that. Like, how do you deal with that? Have you ever run into that situation?
I've been on both sides of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of that. So,
and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so when you're on the receiving side, you're a new hire and you're being thrown into a situation where there's so much technical debt and they're trying to put everything together. I've always had to go down to the product owner, the CEO, and say, we have to have a real conversation about this. We need to, do a postmortem on the product that we've already got done, that we've already released. And we need to really assess, what are we trying to build? Why did we try to build it? And, who is it actually intended for? Because most of the time, you're right, like you said, they're talking to people in the street and everyone's saying, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. And they're trying to make everyone happy, but you can't make everyone happy. In those cases, we usually try and kind of implement new practices like, okay, let's have a daily meeting for the next 3 months, trying to figure out what exactly we're rebuilding. What are we doing today? What are we doing over the next 7 days? And in those situations, like my experience has always been every day, because the CEO has been so used to everything being done for them. Like, I want this feature right now. Drop everything else they're doing. They're so used to that they really don't realize that they are changing the goalpost every single
Mm-hmm.
day. So when we're having these meetings, on a daily basis, we'll catch in, someone will say, okay, I want this new feature instead, and then we'll stop them and point out, okay, just so you know, we have to drop all of this work we did. We took 10 hours in this other thing, or we took 20 hours in this other thing. We
Mm-hmm.
would actually have to drop this and forget about it to work on your new feature. And it'll take us another 20 hours, which means your product will be even more delayed. And, we're not confident that you can actually sell this at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not meant to be like, you're never going to make money on this. It just, we need to be careful that you're not overextending.
Understood. Understood. Do you have, and on the same angle as a new resource coming into a platform where there's a lot of technical debt? Are there indications within the code? Like I know there's code commenting and documentation. Like, are there ever a roadmap saying, "Hey, I know this was done not really well, but we didn't do it. We did it this way because of such and such a reason." Like, are there roadmaps like that exist for you?
Uh, Sometimes. So, in like for my experience, it was in the comments, and it was just someone said, "I'm sorry, this is so awful." um,
Yeah.
I said, "I'm sorry, this is so awful. This is why," and it was like every function had a thing that said, "I'm sorry, we
Oh
were under the gun,
no.
and we just took the shortcut."
Oh wow. Well, at least they kind of admitted it, and
Oh yeah.
it gives you some ammunition to. I would personally go back and I would say, look, do you want us to keep on saying I'm sorry going forward, or should we build it properly, right?
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. And you like what happens is someone someone needs to come back and say, okay, the product is not going to sell because we're not actually finishing it. We're never, we're taking so many shortcuts that we're going to spend more time trying to fix this than we are actually polishing what we've already built.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to those people are afraid, right? Because when you have a startup, you're afraid your CEO is going to say, okay, you're not doing what I want you to do. I'm going to fire you. And then
Yeah,
people, like in
that's
my experience,
horrible.
people always, they're scared, right?
Yeah, that's I don't know. That's still going on. That's just terrible.
Yeah, I like I have a lot of friends who work in startups, and they have the same story because it's usually someone
Mm-hmm.
who, you know, the CEO is usually someone who has some kind of vision, but they want it done yesterday because they are wanting to get that money and their investment back before it's too late.
Yeah.
But someone has to explain to them, we understand, but the only way to do that is if we actually finish what we've built and we have a narrow, defined list of what we need to accomplish.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's why I like the way that we're set up at Simply PHP, and I don't want to make this a sales podcast, but that's the way that we're set up so that we can push back nicely to CEOs that don't have the budget, don't have the time, but are trying to force our people to make it happen anyway, make the impossible happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates for an incredibly stressful environment. And if you're taking shortcuts like that and you're creating technical debt, that's definitely not good.
No, and like it's understandable too when you're dealing with someone who is, they're maybe a young CEO, maybe they're not, but uh, they've got the vision. Like for them, they don't want to lose everything. They don't want to lose their dream. They want to see their
Yeah,
dream actually succeed. And
yeah.
it's so that you have to approach them not in necessarily this is going to fail if we keep going on this path, but maybe more, um, you know, we we care about this actually succeeding. We're with
Mm-hmm.
you on this, and we're concerned that if we keep going on this path, we're never going to finish it, and all this will be for nothing. So, please let's try and pick like three major features that we want to actually deliver before we get carried away.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen that happen in the past where startups have spent so much time and effort and money, and they don't even have a working product at the end. And so that's, I would rather a development team that would, put their foot down and speak up and say, hey, if we're going to go down this path, we're going to fall over a cliff. You know,
Exactly. Well,
yeah,
the big thing is the development team has your best interests in mind because it's their jobs. They don't want to lose their jobs because the
yeah,
company fails. They want to make sure everything succeeds. So
yeah,
you have to trust your development team that they really do care about, the
yeah.
company thriving.
Yeah, I think that's where someone like V comes in
Mhm.
our company, V and Ryan, just to be able to set the right expectations and make sure that it doesn't. Because I listen. I know engineers, and some of them will just put their head down and they will just go through absolute hell,
Mhm.
and they'll end up resigning eventually, and then that's where this technical debt starts to request payment, right? That's when you're like,
Yep.
oh, geez, okay. And then everyone starts throwing that person under the bus until you read those little notes, those little sorry notes, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, you don't want to be in a toxic environment. You don't want to be in a situation where your team is competing. They should be able to
Mm-hmm.
work together, and they should feel like when they come in, they can have an honest conversation, whether it's with the CEO or with the project manager. Just, this is how we feel. This is what we need. Let's make a plan.
Okay, so let me ask you last question, Chad,
Sure.
because we only got a few minutes left. Um, oh, we have a question. Okay, but my last question. Well, you know what? Let's hear the question because it may be similar to what I'm going to ask. Yeah. Can we hear you, by the way, Raf? No? Okay, so I'll repeat whatever you say. Tony, you're doing great. Thank you. Yeah, so that's great. That's a great question because it was sort of what I was going to ask. From who? Oh, Raiko. I love Raiko. He's still around. He's great. Yeah, so I'll kind of I'll kind of ask the question that Rico was asking, but I want to also tailor it to our company. So, what would you do, Chad, if you were in a situation where we were just talking about? So you have you've been assigned to a new project tomorrow, and the CEO is saying this is a set of requirements. I want it to be done in 3 months, and you're saying this is like a 7 or 8 month project, and it's kind of the raw boardroom deadline type of attitude. Now the way that our company is set up, and don't forget, now you can use V, you can use Ryan, you can use Tony, you can use Raf, or you can talk directly to the CEO. What would you do to kind of echo Rico's question? What would you do to change that CEO's attitude? How would it work in Simply PHP?
And are we talking about, if we're talking to a client, right? We're simply PHP, we're talking to a client.
We're talking about a brand new client that's come on board that
Yep.
has unreasonable expectations that if you follow them,
Is going to lose
you are
all.
going to live a life of a little bit of a nightmare. You're going to create all kinds of technical debt. What do you do? What does
Yeah.
Chad do?
So in that case, create a plan in the sense that, okay, here is our proposal for best practice. You want your product, we can do it in this amount of time with these steps, but also risk assessment. So if we, for each step that we can skip these steps to give you your product in that time, but if we skip this step, you could potentially be hacked. And let's say it's like
Mm-hmm.
a financial service company, you could be
Yeah.
hacked, which means you could be sued for millions. You could actually lose if you're regulated, you could lose your government accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
You could be investigated. If it's say testing, okay, you have millions of dollars in the line here. So if we skip testing, you could potentially have a situation where your customers who have put in who knows how much money are running away because they don't, your product doesn't work. So I would focus on providing that actual clarification of risk. So they are aware that we're not doing it because we want, to burn their money. We are doing it because we want them to succeed. We want them to know that if we don't do the right steps, there's a huge risk in their business, and we don't want to facilitate that. We don't believe it'd be appropriate or fair to them to put themselves in such a huge kind of danger zone.
Absolutely. So that's a great answer, because in the end, the ultimate solution is to walk away from the client, and I'll put that out there right away. Like, so if we raise all these flags and say all these things, and they say, well, I don't care, we got to make it happen, we're like, okay, I'm sure you'll find a company that's going to say yes, 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 and build you some type of contraption that's going to get you in trouble, but it won't be us. So that's great. That's absolutely that's fantastic. I'm glad we're set up for that. I'm glad that we have it all front of mind too, because technical debt is a huge thing to avoid. And I thank you for your time, Chad. Great episode. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to our next podcast, which will probably either be a week from now or 2 weeks from now. And let us know if there's anything interesting that you want us to address wherever you're seeing this podcast, whether it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever. Give us a comment, and if you want to suggest some subjects, we are open to covering anything. All right. Take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.